Sometimes I wake up and wonder how we ended up here in a boatyard in the Caribbean. With a sailboat we bought 2 years ago with no sailing experience at all. We bought the boat in the Canary Islands, sailed down to Cape Verde and from there across the Atlantic to Brazil. In Brazil we left the boat behind and spent 4 months traveling with our backpacks. After that we slowly sailed north again until we reached French Guiana, and that's where this story begins. We were waiting for a weather window for the last leg to the Caribbean. 8 days at sea. Our next destination, Trinidad. I should feel excited, but this time it feels different.
Aber tschüss, tschüss. Diana. Bye bye. Hallo, wir haben kurz rausgekommen. Mindestens unterwegs bis zum Anfang vom Channel.
On the morning of our departure, we paddle back to shore one last time. We need the exit stamp for the boat. Without it, we won't be allowed into the Caribbean. When we return, we start casting off the lines, or at least we try. The last one is completely tangled, so we wave over the little police boat next to us. 2 minutes later, everything is free. They wish us a safe journey, and suddenly we are truly on our own. For the first time in a long while, that feeling is back in my stomach, a slight tension. Maybe it's because of the stories you hear in the harbors, pirates, robberies, things that supposedly happened somewhere. You never really know what's true, but the images stay in your head. For a long time, nothing really happens. We simply follow the narrow channel through the brown water. Forest on our side, barely any movement, barely any sound.
Oh, das wird eng.
And then, suddenly, everything happens at once. The channel grows narrower and shallower, and right there, a massive ship is heading straight toward us. We have to move all the way to the edge as it slowly passes by. For a moment, everything revolves around that one ship and the thin strip of water left for us. And right in that moment, a huge flock of macaws sweep across the forest. Their red bodies glowing against the dark green canopy, flashes of blue wings catching the light, their loud calls filling the air around us. For a brief moment, everything is color, movement and noise, while we're still making our way through that narrow channel beside the giant ship.
Sobald er vorbei ist, musst du auf links rein. Gell? Hat uns noch ein Küsschen zugeworfen. Ui, ui, ui. So nah da hinten in Suriname, in Frankreich. Und da hinten haben wir. Nein, da hinten haben wir Suriname. Da haben wir Suriname. Und da haben wir Frankreich. Und das ist krass, wir sind so nah. Obwohl der Fluss urbreit ist, aber wir müssen mega nah da hinfahren, weil nur da machen wir so einen Channel parat.
The gusts in the river suddenly reach up to 30 knots, even though the forecast shows much less. They just appear out of nowhere. Right here at the river mouth, things can get tricky. The water is shallow, and wind and current meet, they can build up short, steep waves very quickly. We don't know if it will be the same out on the open sea, or if it's just caused by the squalls. Those dark rain clouds that pass through in the tropics, bringing short periods of heavy rain and strong gusts. And with bigger waves, your draft suddenly becomes a very different story. The boat drops into the low point between the waves, then lifts again, and the distance to the bottom keeps changing. What still looks safe on the depth sounder can suddenly feel very close in those conditions. We have to time it just right, ideally with the incoming tide, so there's enough water under the keel, and we are not fighting the current on the way out. And as we slowly make our way toward the mouth, we keep asking ourselves if the forecast is really accurate, or if we are about to sail into something we won't be able to control. You might wonder what the exit of the channel was like, and to be honest, it was anything but calm. Just I start to relax, thinking we finally have enough water under the keel. We spot some fishermen standing right in the middle of the channel in front of us, and at first I couldn't tell if they have any net out, but then they point ahead and I start to see all those small yellow buoys in the water. So to avoid them, we had to leave the channel. Exactly what I didn't want to do, because you never really know how deep it is out there, and the charts aren't reliable, and there are supposed to be wrecks like everywhere. So we keep going further and further, and the net just doesn't seem to end. So eventually we felt very uncomfortable. So we decided to turn around and just try from the other side. And luckily it worked way better. We stayed closer to the channel, and after I could finally take a breath. But only for a very short moment, because then I just see another net. I just see a big black flag right next to the channel, and much too late I realized which way the net was running. It was straight across the channel, so the only thing left I could do was steer right between the two buoys and hope that the net hangs deep enough so it doesn't get caught in our propeller. And I was so ready to throw the engine into neutral at any second. But yes, once again, we got really lucky, and then we finally had clear water ahead. The first night is hard. We barely get any sleep, and squalls keep passing over us, bringing wind and rain, and that uneasy feeling that everything could change at any moment. It's pitch dark, because the moon spends most of the night hidden behind the clouds, and the sea around us feels endless and empty. It's not really cold, just wet, dark and uncomfortable, and the night feels much longer than it really is. In the middle of one of those dark nights, while the sea gently rocks us back and forth, we suddenly have a visitor. Without any warning, a small storm petrel lands on our boat as if it had simply been looking for a quiet place in the rain and decided that our deck would be its home for the night. Of course, it chooses the one line we urgently need, and it watches us with dark, alert eyes, as if it trying to figure out who we are. Even though the wind sweeps across the deck and light rain keeps drifting over us, he stays exactly where he is, completely unimpressed by us and by the night around him. He doesn't move away. He even allows us to touch his belly, calm and almost composed, as if for a moment he has forgotten that he belongs to the open ocean. Outside, everything remains the same, wet, dark and uncomfortable, but this small visit changes something in the mood of the night. For a moment, it no longer feels exhausting, but special. And it is this brief, almost magical instant that stays with us later, stronger in memory than the discomfort ever was. He stays with us for almost the entire night, like a tiny stowaway who joins our journey for a few hours.
Fix und fertig. Chaos. Und alles ist nass.
The next day, the sun finally comes out, and with it, everything feels a little lighter. The wind eases, the waves grow calmer, and for the first time since leaving, the boat feels steady and familiar again. We dry our wet clothes and catch up on sleep we missed during the night. And slowly, almost without noticing, life on board becomes easier again. There is something about being surrounded by water that changes the way time moves, and I only ever notice it after a few days. The horizon remains the same, no matter how long you look at it. The waves repeat themselves in an endless motion, and the boat rocks in a rhythm that at some point stops drawing attention because it simply becomes natural. The days out here have no clear beginning and no distinct end. They start with light and fade into darkness, and in between nothing spectacular happens, nothing that urgently demands to be captured. You wake up, check the wind, put water on for coffee, adjust the sails, watch the sky. It is always the same small tasks, and yet none of them feel unnecessary. Maybe it is exactly this repetition that calms something inside. There are fewer decisions, fewer impressions, fewer things pulling at your attention all at once. Instead, space begins to appear. Space between thoughts, space between actions. Space where you simply exist and let the boat do its work beneath you. The next few days are quiet. So quiet that I barely do anything but read. I sit in a cockpit with my legs stretched out, a book resting on my knees, and I lose myself page after page in other stories, as if there were nothing more urgent in the world. Sometimes I look up and see nothing but water and sky, and then I keep reading, without the feeling that I'm missing anything. It is not a spectacular kind of calm, not one that feels grand or particularly important. It is simple and almost unnoticed. And perhaps that is the way it stays. When I think back to those days later, I don't remember a specific hour or a single remarkable event, but rather this slow, wide feeling that settles in when nothing needs to be hurried.